Welcome to today's webinar, Intimacy at Scale, Delivering on the Promise of Personalization, brought to you by Predictix, the leader in cloud-native prescriptive retail decision software. It's my pleasure to present to you today this webinar, and with me is Greg Gerard, retail analyst with IDC Research and thought leader. My name is Kevin Sternikert, and Greg and I will be sharing some observations, best practices, and the required ingredients to deliver intimacy at scale. We'll use a little bit of a different format than what you might be used to for a traditional webinar. Times are not traditional and legacy approaches are not working, so we thought it'd be helpful if we share just a few visual slides, but based most of the webinar on the content of our conversation to guide through these topics that we'll be discussing today. So with that, we will have some question time at the end of our webinar for questions. So if you have those questions, feel free to enter them into the question box, and then we will address those at the end. All of the mics have been muted for convenience to make sure that we do not have noise or interruptions outside of the webinar. And we appreciate your attendance, and we believe that you're going to find this to be very invigorating and helpful as you think about how retailers can truly achieve intimacy with their consumers at a time that is very challenging as well as difficult with scale. So Greg, thank you so much for joining us and participating on our webinar. And you and I have known each other for a long time, and it's been fun preparing this content. You know, the first thing I think is probably helpful is to really understand just what is intimacy in the eyes of a retailer, especially maybe a large retailer. What are some of your thoughts around that?
Oh, well, thanks, Kevin. It's a real pleasure to join you. Indeed, we've known each other quite some time. So intimacy today, it's really being set forth on the terms that each customer sets up with their expectations for a particular retailer. And intimacy is really about anticipating and fulfilling what the customer is going to require. And it goes across many touch points. The other side of this is scale. So the intimacy today exists not just in understanding your customer, we're going to talk about that in a moment, but it also implies the need to understand everything you can about your business, about how your business presents itself to your customer, and how your business differentiates itself from competitors who are only and always only a click or two away from even your most loyal customers. So those are some of my early thoughts about that, Kevin, in terms of intimacy. And I think the other side of that is scale, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. You know, the interesting thing here in our discussion in preparing for today's content, I really just wanted to make sure that the definition of intimacy was not equated with loyalty programs of the past. What we're really talking about here, you know, is for a retailer to truly understand the customers that are shopping at their individual stores and working to deliver the types of products and services that the customer is looking for. And, you know, today it's a really challenging environment. I don't need to teach retail to anyone that's on our webinar today. We're all focused on it. But the real difficulty here is breaking out from the pack and delivering a differentiated experience that matters for the customer. And this isn't just about, you know, how do I send an offer to a customer that's relevant to what they're interested in, or how do I, rack up enough points that are going to cause them to want to come back to my store. It's not about that at all. The challenge of real intimacy with the consumer is creating this dialogue in many ways where the customer feels connected with the retailer and that they want to participate and engage, and they want to be an actual paying customer of the retailer, and frequent them for more
You know,
than just items, right?
you,
Buying items.
you use the word participate there, and I think that's really important in this context. And I think you also said conversation. A couple of years ago, I coined the term, notion of participatory commerce. I wanted that to ring and echo participatory democracy, and to talk about how the terms of engagement between consumers and retailers, consumers are participating in that, and they very much want to and expect to. And a retailer that can't deliver a participatory experience, and we're seeing some retailers do that, are at a disadvantage to those that can achieve that kind of continuous dialogue and context that provides the rationale for a consumer to want to participate.
Yeah, it's so very true. You've done some research recently that I thought was really appropriate to share around this topic. I've put up some of the stats. Would you share with the audience these findings?
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Kevin. Just the source here is, I think, important. Every year, IDC and our business units, IDC Retail Insights in particular, sets forth a number of predictions for what we think will be happening over the next 12 to 36 months. And a couple of these are taken from the overall IDC perspective, and the remainder from the IDC Retail Insights perspective. The first there, the overhaul of the digital front door. This ties up with our notion of the 5I persona. All of us today, billions of consumers globally, are what we call instrumented with digital technologies. Started with smartphones, and now it includes wearables and biometric data. We live instrumented lives, and that enables us to communicate, interact. Another I, we're always informed. We're always in place with this mobility with us, and we're immediate in our ability to act. The point here is that mobility has really unified, although it's not always delivered in a unified way, a customer's experience across channels. At the same time, channels are not going away. In fact, they are expanding in number and also in complexity. And that's giving way to what we think will be a complete transformation in the number of touch points. Some will be hidden out of view from the consumer between those touch points between the consumer and the retailer. All of these touch points, in order to be successful, must be perceived by the consumer as good, that is, as adding value and not impinging on privacy. Right? There's that creepiness factor that we've always got to guard against. The other notion here that I think is important that I'll pull out before I turn it back to you, Kevin, is this notion of cognitive everything. With the advent of deep learning or machine learning, advanced semantic analysis, natural language processing, and natural language generation, retailers and others are starting to have the ability to bring cognitive into many decision and forecasting requirements. So we're seeing cognitive come into forecasting, into assortments, into the guided selling, both online and in store, and also localization are just a couple of the ways that we're seeing cognitive play out.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I kind of will date myself a bit, but when I was in high school, we had three channels on our TV, and then there was the fourth one that we got excited about because it was something other than the national broadcast channels.
Right.
And it was pretty easy to choose because it was either the president was on or it was cartoons or something like that, right? So it was pretty easy choices and clear which channel you would choose to watch. I see what's happening today in retail much the same as that experience, where at some point in time there were a few choices and it was clear and easy. And now there's more channels than you know what to do with, and it's really hard to decide which channel to watch if you watch at all. And in most cases, you don't watch anything. You watch what you want when you want it recorded and when it's most convenient and when you have a few minutes, and you get to cut out all the commercials, right? Because you're using a DVR, which is really interesting to think about in retail today because there's so many opportunities for the customer to touch a retailer and to not go through the traditional um, web or maze that a retailer might have wanted a customer to engage in the past. You know, thinking about, for example, hey, we're going to in grocery put milk at the back of the store because we want the customer to walk through the whole store.
Right.
Well, the retailers are really thinking about the customer, now puts everything in the convenience areas to make it easier for the customer to get in and out because they want that trip, whatever at whatever cost. Um, and this is interesting because it's really about finding out who your customer is, understanding through many different sources of input what are their preferences, and then creating a experience that is conducive and refreshing, informative, respectful for the customer in a way that endears them to the brand. And I had
Kevin, let me pick up. If could I pick up on that a sec? To the notion of your way of fulfillment. That is a way that consumers are demanding fulfillment. Delivery same day, within a time frame, next day at my store or to my home. And in order to do that, you can make the promise to fulfill anyway, but you need technology behind that in order to do it profitably and to do it consistently well, and to understand what the cost of service is and to maintain the cost of service within below a threshold that retains profitability while you make that new promise, right, against rising customer expectations. The other notion here, and I think it's important to keep in mind that we have a tide of rising expectation, and each consumer sets as their minimum expectation everywhere their best experience anywhere, right?
Yeah,
So
that is very
they're
true. And it's very interesting to think about this. You have a stat here: 85% expect one-click commerce, right?
right.
So today, in some metropolitan areas in the U.S. and in Europe, with 1 hour delivery, in the U.S. Prime Now, you can get a Ben and Jerry's ice cream delivered to your hotel room cheaper and faster than room service. That changes.
Now
That
that was tried. That was tried. That's a great point. And I want to just underscore that you need to be able to do that profitably. That business was built up 10 or 15 years ago, and it crashed and burned because they couldn't control their costs. You know, um, and so you got to be able to have scale and cost efficiencies in order to do that.
Well, of course, and we're seeing retailers take new approaches to making that cost effective.
Correct.
Instead of
Absolutely.
hiring a driver and a truck and waiting around, using an on-demand delivery like Uber, right? So what the real point is that these touch points that customers are engaging in are pushing the envelope of what traditional retail has looked like, and the expectations of what customers are looking for, and how retailers need to really study the customer so that they respond correctly in a way that engages. So there's a few key concepts here that I think really illustrate the um, elements that are at play. First, I'll pick out this analytics at scale.
Hmm.
And as I think about that, Greg, it's not that retailers want more data. In fact, in the last 15 years, I don't think I've ever had a retailer say they need more data. What they really need is to understand what should I do with the data that I have,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
And
Right.
then understanding more than just the interactions that you have with your customer and the insights that that brings, but understanding the environment that the customer is living within. So it's understanding your competition, understanding the impact that is applying force to the customer, the motivating purpose or reason why they're interested in buying something or securing some service at all, and then understanding how what you are doing impacts the consumer. And there's the traditional levers of price and promotion and assortment and markdown, etc. But there's so many more elements to get this right with the customer, and it requires that you have more than just how you interact with the customer at your fingertips, because the customer has so many more points of interaction that don't include a retailer that really make up the equation that drives the customer from one location to another. It's really key.
Yeah, Kevin, I think there you segued appropriately so from analytics at scale to 360-degree customer insight isn't enough. You know, you focused on what's the importance of understanding what your competitors are doing. And also, let's just go to that notion of 360 customer insight. Retailers myopically have thought of that as we need a 360-degree view of my customer's interaction with me across all of the touch points. Well, for any retailer, its consumers' interactions with it comprise maybe 20% at most, or certainly much less, of the customer's overall set of concerns, activities, and responsibilities. And that is the difference between understanding, rudimentarily what's in a shopping basket, to what's the mission of the trip, right? And that leads us into this notion of personal services webs, which I think is really fundamental. And a personal service web is that nexus of any retailer's system of engagement, CRM and loyalty could be such. Its mobility and its apps and so forth are also aspects of its systems of engagement, where those systems of engagement meet up with the consumer's own 5i persona that I mentioned earlier, with their own social, mobile, analytics, and cloud capability. And that's where new services around automated fulfillment, for instance, are coming into play. And ExxonMobil has a cute little app that allows you to find the nearest ExxonMobil gas station where you are, geolocating your presence through your mobile phone. That removes friction, it removes time and distance, if you will. It eases the consumer's path to purchase from ExxonMobil. I'm a mobile guy. I like to put that gas in my car. That's a quick example.
Yeah, and I think the example, Greg, that comes to mind when you mentioned that, I think Tesla has taken just a step further, right?
Yeah,
So the big criticism of a Tesla is that you can't drive coast to coast.
correct, right.
Well, Tesla said, well, let's turn that on its edge and let's facilitate coast to coast. So now built in to every Tesla is in your travels, if you're using the navigation, exactly where the appropriate charging stations are that are available, and when you would need to stop for a proper charge, and to
Right.
maximize everything that you're doing in your trip so that you indeed could go coast to coast without that friction of A, trying to find a charging station that's available, and B, doing it before you run out of your your battery. And
Right.
so, just like you were mentioning, but taking it to the next step, something that is super useful and not easy to accomplish, but will be rewarded because the customer appreciates that interaction and that information and that service, right? And I think
Yeah.
exactly what we're talking about here is what does the customer want, and how do I understand what they want, but then how do I provide them with something that they're going to value? and that makes
and
me different.
yeah, and so let's draw that out a bit because I think it's a really important point for retail, which is that example extends the Tesla's corporate and brand relationship beyond purchase into use, right, of that vehicle. And I think that's an important area where retailers and brands can improve their customers' ability to utilize what they sell them, seamlessly and easily.
So,
And
what do you
and
mean about
that's
the shopper bill of rights?
that's a great question. So, you mentioned earlier, the price, promotion, placement, and product, old notions of marketing. But the shopper expects, because of consumer empowerment and their ability to shop through their mobile phones anywhere and everywhere, and complete visibility of the marketplace. With that power, their Bill of Rights. They expect retailers to get certain things right. I mean, product and assortment, channel, all those things are fundamental. Message, promotion, quantity, display it the right way, get the timing right, both so when you have stock in a store that you're not out of stock, get the delivery timing right, whether it's to your home, driven, or over the mail. Keep me informed as to the progress of my delivery. Like Domino's Pizza does, you can actually watch the production of your pizza through the production stages in the shop, all the way down through what your when your driver is approaching and where the driver is.
And the name
So
of the person who's making your pizza.
exactly. So, and then flip that around to what it's doing to that person, right? A thankless job, personalizing that, giving that person pride, right, and establishing a more intimate relationship between a nameless pizza oven guy, or the delivery guy, and the consumer.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really feel like the Bill of Rights for consumers has dramatically improved in the last decade. And there are retailers that are pushing the envelope in helping retailers understand just exactly what they should expect.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
I think in very short order, gone are the days of trying to return a product and getting a hassle. Because there are so many retailers today that have created that return process to be so seamless and so easy. Just go to any Costco and try to return something. It is almost a delight. You're
Yeah.
thanked for your business. There's never a hassle. There's no questions asked. You're returning it because you're not pleased. Here is your money back. How can we help you?
Yeah. And
Without
even better,
any other.
even better, eliminate the need for a return, and reduce the consumer's friction to purchase. This is especially important in apparel when you're not sure about size and fit.
Yeah,
And some apparel retailers now have an ability to improve the likelihood that a particular garment is going to fit a particular customer based on data they know about the dimensionality and feel of individual products, which is learned through deep learning and machine learning, and a particular customer's set of preferences based on how they like different brands and sizes and cuts of garments.
certainly.
So that's making shopping more delightful, right? Yeah, I have a expectation and a right to get something that fits,
Yeah.
in online apparel.
And when all else fails, if it doesn't, there's just no hassle in making it right. You know.
Correct.
Well,
Right.
we've talked about some concepts and we've talked about some facts about what retailers are experiencing. So I think it's appropriate to talk now about what it will take to win in this retail environment. We've talked
Right.
about this 360-degree view. And I think that is something that, Greg, you can probably touch on a bit more. I want to talk about this idea of data and holistic customer intimacy. So
Hmm.
this doesn't happen because you just have a bunch of insights and you look at a stack of reports, and from that stack of reports, you're able to envision the solution, be it product or services, for the customer. That's not the way the leading retailers are arriving at winning solutions for customers. The way leading retailers are doing it is they're using predictive and prescriptive analytics to help them understand um, far reaching interactions with the customer deep into data that most mere mortals can't consume because there's too many data points and too infrequent correlations and too much data to consume. I remember when I was working at Walmart, one of the things I did is on occasion I would go pick up the reports for our senior executive team. And the stack of reports that was delivered on a Monday morning was literally 2.5 feet thick. There's just no way that anyone was able to review all of that information and be able to, from it, know exactly what to do. And so what I believe is a key to winning in retail today is to be able to have insights that are presented as proposed actions, providing the decision maker with the ability to actually make a decision based on recommendations, and then a path for execution. So, whatever the decision is, it is not difficult to execute in a way that's driven as a process platform that allows for these interactions to happen across all the decisions that a retailer needs to make, be it the supply chain or the assortment or price or promotion, whatever the case may be. Combining this understanding of the customer with deep insights that provide recommendations for real decisions. Hey, this assortment is not competitive. Your competitors are taking you to the mat. You don't have enough robustness in this particular area with attributes that are missing. Recommend improving the assortment by including items around these areas. That's the kind of insight that's driving intimacy, and it's intimacy at scale because it gives you an understanding of what you need to do for one store versus another. So those two pieces I think are key for retailers to really execute on this idea of delivering what the customer expects.
Kevin, I think you did a great job summarizing that. Well done. I would also just comment that when we think about a holistic customer intimacy framework, the notion of balanced scorecard comes to mind. And that was a concept that came into vogue a number of years ago. And the point of that is to understand who the stakeholders are in a particular process and what the trade-offs are amongst and across those key constituencies in order that the implications of any particular decision is well understood, not just in its first order or intended consequences, but how those decisions percolate out into adjacencies, right? So, I mean, the classic problem in retail has been that a store manager's incentives and evaluate criteria for success differ from those of supply chain and differ from those of others. So that's just a quick thing. If you do those things that you've talked about so well, then you naturally go into that notion of a localized profitable loyalty and inventory productivity. You know, that's the key balance, because inventory productivity gives you a better balance sheet, frees up cash. It allows you to actually put more product in your store or in less space if you get your inventory localized and properly suited, and I know you'll give an example about that. And that's going to drive higher loyalty and higher expectations, or satisfy higher expectations and convert customers into increasingly more profitable loyalty segments. You know, all of this depends on that notion we talked about before of that holistic 360-degree view of customers, business, and markets. And I think I've spoken to that in this notion of the balanced scorecard a bit. And the markets are what your competitors are doing, what your customers are experiencing. And this is where the notion of data becomes very important, and the notion of big data. It's been used a lot, but I think it's an important concept, that there are these new sources of data that can be consumed and analyzed to provide additional insight. Say you don't know all you need to know about the particular demand. The classic thing is, I don't know what I can sell if I haven't sold it in a store, right? That's a great quandary. With looking at news, events, social data that's coming through all kinds of online environments, you might be able to understand the trends of new products, and people are using those sources to understand the life cycle position of a particular product, how well a new product will sell, and how well particular types of products will fit up to the evaluation criteria of different customers in their different store locales.
Yeah, I think key, right? So I'd like to just talk for a moment about some retailers that are demonstrating proficiency in each of these areas. And I'll
Good, good.
start with one. So I'm very impressed with what the Home Depot is doing. And publicly, they presented an example of how they're doing all of these elements, understanding the market, weighing profitability of inventory and productivity, looking at the customer, and applying data. And they give the example of hot water heaters. Now, if you know anything about hot water heaters, first of all, when you need one, you don't want to wait for the right one. You want it when you need it, because if you need it, it probably means that going too long means you're going to be taking cold showers or baths. And in my household, that's not something that anybody's going to appreciate. And so if I need a water heater, I'm going and I want to come home with it, or I want to arrange to have it installed. And having the right water heater is not trivial, because there's gas, electric, computer controlled, high efficiency, tankless, wireless, Wi Fi, all different kinds of versions. And, the idea of having the right assortment in a store is really hard, because there's such a breadth and so many different views of what right is, that you can find yourself with too much inventory and stagnant inventory, and having a challenge of unproductive inventory, and even being out of the things that your customers want, because you just don't physically have enough room to store those items in addition to everything else that you want to carry in a robust assortment. So what the Home Depot did is they studied the customers' buying behaviors, and they looked deep into all of the characteristics. And they did this, by the way, using technology, not by reports and teasing it out manually. And what the result of their assortment analysis showed was that in some stores, customers prefer gas. In other stores, they prefer electric. And in still others, they prefer small gas or small electric, etc. But at the end of the day, what the Home Depot found is that there were enough variances that they needed to have 1,800 different assortments for their over 1,900 stores. And to scale that and to do it automatically was key for the Home Depot. Because when they delivered the new and revised assortments, they recognized double-digit sales increases. Now, they didn't populate their data mart with where gas or electric is available, where small or big homes are. They studied the customer behaviors. What came from it was rather interesting, because as they saw all the growth in sales and profit, they wanted to understand it more, because they wanted to be able to duplicate that elsewhere. And they looked at a heat map of the different clusters, and they could clearly see where gas is available in homes for customers that shop in the local stores versus not. And it was a near perfect map of electric versus gas, large versus small, high end versus low end, without feeding it demographic data, without feeding it utility data. The customer was signaling to the Home Depot all along exactly what they're looking for when they go to buy a hot water heater in a store in a local Home Depot. I think this is a great example because as they have continued to refine the assortments, they continue to see significant and tremendous improvements in their assortments. And in fact, in their earnings calls, they mention three pillars of success, and one of them is making sure they have the right assortments every day in each store for the customers that frequent. And I think it's a big testament to their efforts, but also demonstrates all of the items that we just discussed as the keys to winning.
Kevin, that's a great example. Let me just draw out a couple implications of that. The first is data. I think the Home Depot is able to, or a retailer that's doing that kind of extreme localization and extreme fit of assortments to the sales patterns, demand patterns, really, demand patterns in a particular store. Are doing that by consuming lots of attribute data. We've used the word attributes once or twice before in this conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And that's critical. I mean, you can't do that in the traditional hierarchies by which we evaluate our products. And those attribute relationships get pretty complex and hairy, to use a technical term, as you try to analyze them. And to do that at scale. And the built space that as you have for the presentation of that stock, and also what you might have offline, or beyond the in an endless aisle, although you might not water heaters in an endless aisle for what you've said. But I think that's important. So we've got the data, we've got scale, and I know that Home Depot won't stop at water heaters, right?
Oh, no.
They can, they can take the same approach and take it just about anywhere,
That's right.
where
Exactly.
there is,
So,
yeah,
are there a couple of
I
retailers you
suspect
think
also
about?
yeah. So I see a couple who are coming at it from slightly different angles. Jet.com is a very interesting, I call it, a born digital retailer that's come on the scene recently. You might have seen their advertisements. As you buy products, as you add products to your shopping cart, the price of products already in your shopping cart change. Well, they typically only go down, right? Maybe if you remove a product, they'll go back up. But that reflects Jet.com's ability to, in a real-time basis, calculate the margin on the basket, right? And they've got basket margin targets rather than product margin targets. So think about this. We're flipping from a price optimization world to a basket margin. See that the consumer is just participating now in the determination of price, and that's a source of delight. Imagine if you could do that. I think that's really cool. A simpler example comes from Marks and Spencer across the pond. Where they're triangulating on a customer's proximity to a store. What they understand to be the customer's next most likely purchase intent is, and the inventory position of products in that particular store, right, against that particular customer's propensity. So this helps them serve up a promotion, if you will, or some sort of invitation to visit the store, because with an offer that can be fulfilled and is most likely fitted to a particular consumer's current or immediate next purchase decision. Those, I think, are two good examples.
Yeah, I think those are great examples, and it's and there are many others. I'll tell you though that there's not hundreds of others. and
Right, right.
and retailers are just starting to really understand what it means to deliver on the promise that the customer expects. I think there's some things that retailers should really work hard to avoid. And as you and I talked about this, what is it that retailers should avoid? Where do we see retailers falling down? I see three areas where retailers fall down when they're on this journey of improving their conversation with the customer and the dialogue and the relationship. One is thinking that a better business intelligence tool is the answer, right? Just I need better data, better insights. This is not where the answer lies. The answer really lies in predictive and prescriptive recommendations at the point of decision. So when a merchant or a supply chain operator or the store associates need to make a decision, what is the recommended best decision to help influence and achieve the objectives that the retailer has? I think that's key. I think also expecting that whatever approach you choose has everything that you're going to need now and in the future is a big mistake also. It's really key that retailers understand that they need technology that is flexible and agile and can change and grow with the needs. Because what we're talking about today, people were not talking about generally 18 months ago.
Right.
And for a lot of technologies, it takes a year to 18 months to install. And so if you install that technology 18 months from now, whatever you were thinking retail looked like now will not be what it looks like when that technology is ready to use. So the technology that companies will choose need to have the ability to morph, right, to grow and to adjust and migrate. We all kind of laugh and scoff at drone deliveries, but Amazon isn't laughing and scoffing, and they're pretty intent on it. And that's going to change what retail looks like, and retailers need to recognize that those kinds of changes are going to happen, and they're going to continue to happen fast.
Hey, Kevin, can I draw a couple implications of what you just said?
Yeah,
First, with respect to that BI tool, you made a really interesting, quick comment about bringing that information to even a store associate, to the front line, right? Predictive and prescriptive insights need to be brought to that frontline consumer or frontline customer, frontline customer-facing associate. And we have found that that's a earmark of more successful retailers as they attempt to advance their analytics, those that bring those insights to the frontline workers' roles tend to exceed their expectations more than retailers who don't. The second point you made with respect to expecting that one tool has everything you need when you start, you mentioned, I think, importantly, that the business is going to change, right? Well, the tools are going to change, right? We are living in a world of rapid innovation in the types of analytics that are available in order to handle new sources of data and to meet new challenges. So, tomorrow or next year, there's going to be a new set of capabilities, and so you need to look for an evergreen vendor and tool set that can grow with the art of the possible, right? And don't think what's available today is going to carry you and won't be superseded in a short period of time with something that's better, because something better is coming quicker down the road
right.
than ever before.
Yeah, exactly. I think the final point here is that I think it's also a big mistake to pull together some type of analytics team and expect that that analytics team is going to be the recommending engine for the decision makers, right? So hire the team, and they'll disseminate the recommendations to the different decision groups, and that will be sufficient. That's not what I'm seeing leaders do. They are hiring analytics teams, but those analytics teams are working to refine and tune the recommendations that are doled out on a regular basis at the decision maker level. If you have to stop what you're doing and put in a request to an analytics team and wait for that response, which may come hours or days later, that just isn't going to meet the requirements of the customer or the decision maker. They need it far faster and far better than that type of interaction. And
Yeah,
so,
we're in a world now of the citizen data scientist, right?
yeah,
Where where um, knowledge workers who are responsible for making decisions in merchandising, promotions, whatever they're planning, whatever their particular domains are, have an ability, a facility with tools that are able that enable them to make data science kinds of uh, decisions, but hiding all the complexity from them. The second key point here is that this phrase of tossing insights over the wall. That's a key earmark of failure or predictor of failure. Our research has found that retailers that create a culture of collaboration and communication across IT, analytics centers of excellence, and lines of business are much more likely to succeed than those that have either those separated by walls or work at it sequentially or don't talk effectively to one another. And talking, it's really the effectivity of the talk rather than the frequency of the talk, right? That's determinative of success.
yeah, I think that's key. So I felt like we felt like it would be helpful also if you share with the audience what are the key characteristics and technology markers that retailers should be looking for. And I'll cover a couple of these, and Greg will cover a couple. We've mentioned them a little bit as side comments, but there's a couple here that are key. First of all, machine learning is a key element that retailers should be looking for. Trying to tease out massive amounts of information and understanding and having predictable correlated events is complex and difficult, and without machine learning, uh, is flawed. And the reason why this is because if you're trying to fit a demand model to some type of algorithm, you inherently are expecting that consumer demand will not change, that the types of behaviors that you're seeing will continue so that you can predict using a particular algorithm. With machine learning, you're not saddled with that requirement, and it's flexible and has the ability to change with consumer behaviors and to be able to understand and predict behaviors accurately. It's a key marker that retailers should be looking for and to understand machine learning. And there's a litany of people who are talking about what is the definition of machine learning, and that's a whole nother webinar topic, to be truthful. I think the other is to be cloud optimized. And with machine learning, you have the capability of just massive amounts of information being analyzed. But if you're not in the cloud and you're not leveraging the cloud properly, you are still constraining what you're analyzing to the hardware that you have internal or hosted and the memory that's either internal or hosted. And with a cloud, a true cloud optimized environment, you are not constrained by computing power or by amount of data. In essence, you can spin up a supercomputer on a moment's notice and spin it right down. And that are two very key markers that are necessary to really drive the types of decisions that will induce and encourage intimacy with the consumer.
Kevin, I think you did a great job with those two. Machine learning, we can break that down into any number of different capabilities. We don't have time to do that now, but I would encourage our audience to, when they evaluate and explore this notion of machine learning, that they look at how it can apply to consuming data that is of varied types, right? And how it can literally find the signal in the noise. That phrase that we've used a lot. But there are signals in the noise that you don't see anymore. You think everything's noise. And noise is a signal that hasn't been processed yet in
That's
our
a great
business.
way to look at it, Greg.
Yeah, and we think we know the signals we should be looking for. Well, there are other signals that we haven't comprehended yet. And that goes to this notion of continuous improvement. And that's more of also a cultural approach and an organizational approach. And it's the ability for an organization to learn as it moves through successive decision-based or fact-based decisions. Some of those will be wrong, right, or not optimal. The next ones will be better, and that's important to understand. That there might be you might get off track a little bit, but there's always an opportunity to improve. Proven value is another one that I think is obvious, but and we have to focus on. And and there are many dimensions of what and who and how something needs to have proven value. So the technology needs to have a proven value. The vendor behind that technology needs to have a track record of proven value. Let's look inside and understand the way that a particular retailer, each retailer goes about making a decision. What's the proven value there? What's the proven value or not of overriding the forecast, right? How often are our forecasts overridden because someone knows better? You need to track, and this goes back to continuous improvement, the effect of an override, right? Of a managerial override of a generated forecast or price.
Greg, that's very interesting because that's a technique that we use for adoption of our forecasting solution. Is we just measure when the machine was right versus when the decision maker was right, and quickly the statistics show that the machine was more right than the decision maker was in trying to override some forecast. And they prove it to themselves.
Right, right. Evidence-based marketing. I mean, evidence-based management, right?
Right.
Not just evidence-based management. Yeah.
Yeah. So these are really super important. We mentioned flexible and configurable. That's another important one because we just don't know what the retail is going to look like 18 months from now. So as companies, as retailers are thinking about the types of technologies that they should procure in order to drive intimacy and to do it at scale, we believe, I believe, Greg and I believe, that these are important markers that you should be looking for. So with that, we have a couple of questions that I'd like to address now. And of course, this webinar was presented by Predictix, so I'm not going to read this screen. I just want you to have it as a backdrop as we address a couple of questions that have come in while we were conducting the webinar. The first one, Greg, I'll ask to you, comes as such. Implementing the technology to create intimacy at scale takes buy-in from a number of stakeholders. And many end users might be afraid that technology will replace their jobs. I mean, we hear about this all the time. How do you recommend going about getting these parties to adopt its use, the technology, and understand that it doesn't replace jobs or humans, and that it actually is going to be a net good for everybody?
Well, Kevin, nowadays the retail industry is confronted with a lot of bad news. There's a fashion retailer, it's rumored just today, is going to file for bankruptcy. There's other retailers that are closing stores or not opening, or yes, many of them are closing stores. That's a surefire way of losing your job, right? Retailers that are able to deploy the kinds of insight producing analytics were suggesting are much more likely to survive and thrive in an increasingly competitive environment and not face the perils of bankruptcy or the inevitable, and self-fulfilling prophecy of shrinking stores, right? As the brand loses relevance and effect. So, sure, some people's jobs will change, uh, and folks need to be able to change with them. Also, the workforce that's coming into more responsible positions, the millennials come in with different sets of skills and expectations about the kinds of decisions they'll be making, the tools that they'll have to make those decisions, and their low threshold to put up with nonsense. Right?
Yeah,
I was going to
that
use
is
another
true.
word, but I decided not to. Right? Uh,
Greg,
so
I would say also one just on the same question. As retailers are adopting these technologies, they're finding sales growth in improving sales per square foot instead
yeah,
of the growth of the last decade or so of improving or increasing square footage, right? And
right.
so retailers, like those that we've highlighted in this webinar, are growing their existing format sales per square foot and their penetration into the household budgets because they've connected, because
Right.
they understand. And winning at this game is about understanding your customer better than your competition and delivering on the promise of what you learn about the customer and doing it uniformly across the disciplines that are either felt or not felt by consumers. You know,
Let me take that a step farther. You made a great point of flipping in a focus on sales productivity or real estate productivity, right? Store square
yeah,
footage
yeah,
productivity, same store sales, in other words. We think that in this world of customer intimacy at scale, the key metric of success is same shopper sales increase, right? And that is a key marker for the extent of loyalty. Um, it's always easier to sell something, an additional item to an existing customer than recruiting a whole new customer. And it also provides a holistic point of view to that customer, whether they shop in a store or not, um, or whether they shop in a store and take delivery or order online. So same shopper sales, I think, is a nice complementary metric to customer intimacy at scale.
yeah, definitely. I think the other thing that we see here is that the winning retailers, those who are doing this the best, understand that they're just getting started and that there's so much more to do in connecting with the customer and building that dialogue and driving the mind share and the wallet share of the customer. And there's a lot of really cool stuff that's going on. And as you can see in the Predictix application suite, we're helping retailers across the board with the most difficult and complex and challenging decisions that they're making today. And every one of these areas are feeling pressure by the market, by the customer, and by the decision makers to make improved decisions that connect with the customer. Well, it's at the end of the hour, and Greg, the boy, that flew by fast. I want to thank you for your participation, your thought leadership, your contribution to the content, and your time. And for those that attended, thank you so much for sharing some time with us. We have recorded this, and we will make that recording available, and you'll receive a thank you note with a link for the recording that you can share with others. It's been my pleasure. It's the pleasure of Predictix to present this webinar and content to you. We hope that you found it helpful. We worked hard to find the nuggets of the elements of what are required to be successful here with the customer and what retailers really need to be focused on in order to get it right. So, with that, thank you so much. We hope that you have a great day, the rest of the day, for whatever part of it remains. And we look forward to finding ways to engage with you and to help you in your journey as you look at connecting with your customers. Have a wonderful day, and thank you.